Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here. Welcome to another tip, trick, or technique of the week. This week I'm going to run you through gain staging and how I do gain staging. Now, gain staging can be done different ways by lots of people, but I'm going to give you my opinion. Now, the way you gain stage can be very different depending on whether you are mixing totally in the box or whether you're using some outboard gear. Obviously, if you're using outboard gear, you need to be watching your levels and you need to be setting your audio levels to suit the hardware. Okay, so most of the time, if there's a meter on there, you're going to want to be sitting at about 0 VU. It depends on the meter type that the device has. So if it's external gear, you really need to check out the manual and work out what the meters are and how they respond, because you might have a VU meter that basically the best position for the audio signal is to aim around 0, or it could be more of a digital style meter where 0 is basically the top end where you're going to start clipping and you don't want to hit that. And that is the case in the meters on here where you start to clip if you go above 0. So in this video, I'm assuming that we're talking about in the box because that's primarily what I work in, and that's what I want to focus on here. I do gain staging at a few different levels. Now, in my case here, I like to start from one sort of side and go to the other. So for instance, let's start by, I've opened up and I started a new mix I've brought in some tracks. The first thing I want to do is I want to set the level of the actual raw audio files that are brought into the project so that they're at a nice level, that they're not clipping or anything like that. Now, there's two components with this. One is, let's say I solo this kick drum here. The first thing I want to look at here is if I assume that I'm not using any plugins, I'm doing this totally digital based, no analog emulation plugins or anything like that, then what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to set my gain of my audio to target somewhere around, minus 12 here, minus 18 dB on the meter. This is giving me a lot of room to move when I add plugins and I do various things. I do not want to be up here at 0. And even 6. I could go to 6 if I wanted to go a little bit hotter, but I'm still pushing it there. I'm not leaving a lot of room. And we've got to remember, we're going to add all of these instruments together further down the track, and they're going to feed into another bus somewhere along the line. So the louder we have all of these, the more we're going to push it into the next layer. So I want to target around here. So if I was to play the kick, you'll see it's sitting pretty much on 12 there. Now, how do I adjust that? This is going to depend on your DAW. I'm pretty sure the majority of them have something in the line of a clip gain facility. And that is where I'm not turning the fader up or down on the actual track. All right, so let's say here's the fader. I'm not going to adjust that. What I'm adjusting here is the actual level of the audio track. Now in Cubase here, I can grab this dot here and I can move it down. So if we watch our meter now, I can bring it down to whatever level I want. So now what I'm doing is I'm setting the level of the audio track to a nice level that I'm happy with before I even touch a fader. So this is not getting the kick to the right level in the mix. This is getting the kick to the right level, just coming into the mix so that it's sitting at the right level here. After that, and this is not gain staging, this is mixing. Mixing, that's when we're going to start moving the fader to make all the instruments gel together and be mixed. Right now, I'm just concentrating on gain staging. And what I don't want is if I push this to the other realm, I don't want my kick up here, and what I definitely don't want is for this to be clipping or going really high. That is bad. We don't want that. Now, unfortunately, I do get a lot of mixes where that's what I get. I will get audio tracks from a client that has recorded them, and they are that hot. And the first thing I do is bring them back down to the level that I want. And like I said, I bring it all the way down to sit around somewhere between the 6 and 18. That's up to you where you want it to be. Minus 12, that's pretty good. So I'll aim for about there. It's a nice level. Now, to go even further though, what I do is, because I like to use some analog emulations, and in the case of this, just as an example, I am using the Slate Digital virtual channel here, and I've got it on a Brit 4K, which is an SSL 4K console. So I'm emulating a console here, an analog console. Now what you'll notice here is that it has a VU meter. So when I actually do this, because I know I'm putting this on every track, I have that in my template prior. Okay, and if you look at this setting here, when I click on this control here, the VU is set to minus 18 dB. So 0 on here is minus 18 dB. So if I want a nice signal that's getting some analog warmth, but it's not distorting or clipping, what I do is I bring up this, and then I play my audio, and I set my clip gain to suit this meter. If I find it's doing that, then it's too hot, and I'll bring it down to sitting at about where I feel it's not peaking too much. It's also not down here where it's not really getting any character of the plugin. I'm trying to hit about 0. Now, again, there's no rules. There's no reason why you can't push this into the red and clip it. That's entirely up to you, because this emulates analog gear. That is actually acceptable to do that, because you will get the distortion, the emulation distortion of the analog gear. So that might be something you want to go for. But if you're not trying to go for that distortion effect and you just want to get some of this analog warmth, I always target around 0. So I'll do that on every track. I'll go through every track looking at these plugins or looking at my meters if I'm not using the plugins, and I'll set the clip gain on each one of those. Once I've done that, then I start mixing. Okay, and when I start mixing, I'll get my levels to where I want them, and everything will be good. But then what I want to do is, because from here, I then feed them to other buses. So for instance, in the case of this one here, you'll notice that I've got all these instruments, guitars, whatever it is, and they all come along my chain, and where they end up on is another set of buses. So in the case of here, I've got a kick, drum stem, drum kit stem, bass stem, guitar stem, etc. So what I want to do here, again, I'm emulating the analog, but if I'm not, I can look at the meter here, and I might decide that when I play this, again, I don't want this hitting too hard. I want it sitting around here. So again, because I'm doing this analog emulation, now with this one here, I'm using the mix bus version because these are on the buses. Now what I want to do again is I might want to still only target 0. So I'll play my kick drum, and it's hitting a bit hard here. So in this case here, if I wasn't happy with how hard that would be hitting, I would then go back, and I would have to then I would use the faders. So for instance here, I've got 3 kick drums. I would use the faders and turn them all down equally, because I don't want to change the mix of the kick. I want to change them all down equally so that they're only hitting around 0 on here. Or if I want them to hit harder, I push them up so they hit harder. Okay, but that's where I do the faders, because I've got the clip gain of the audio working well on the track. Now these faders are what is determining how hard I'm hitting this bus. So then I'm going to adjust those levels using this bus. Now in Cubase, and you might have it in your software, I have this great feature called VCAs. So I can actually do that with the VCAs. I can configure all my kick drums to be controlled by this one VCA, and I can adjust the volume up or down of all those kicks together in their relative state. So I'll play it and I'll show you that. So this is adjusting all of the faders on the kick. So if I was to go all the way back to the kick, you'll see they're all extremely low now because the VCA has moved all of those. So we can push it back up, we can go hotter or lower, whatever you want. So then, so what I would do is I might do that across all of the buses. So I will come across here and I would check the rest of the drum kit. You know, how hard is it hitting? Where do I want it? It's not always going to be at 0. It's going to depend on the elements. Once I'm happy with that, then you might go to the next level. So all of these buses here then feed into a main full mix bus. So all these individual buses feed into this one. And in this one here, in my case, I then have a tape emulator. So what I might want to do on this one, let's just turn the volume down. I might want to be hitting this tape so that I can get some nice character of the tape around 0, or I might want to push it up to get a little bit more tape emulation and a bit more distortion and push it up into the red. And I would do that by adjusting all of the faders on here. Again, we don't want to change the balance between them because that's our mix. Right? We don't want to stuff that up. We just want to place them all together. So you'll see here the entire song is hitting this at around 0. So that then gives us what we actually want in character from the tape. Now again, I have configured all of these buses here. As you can see here, it says stem VCA. So I can actually, with this VCA, control all of those faders with one control, and they all stay relative to where they were, and that will determine how hot I hit that tape. I could go up and hit it harder or lower. Now the advantage of this is that if I always, on every one of my mixes, do that and get all those gain stages going through and always hit this tape at the end of 0, then every single one of my mixes is always the same loudness, because every step of the way I've gain staged and I've hit it to 0. So it might seem like an overly complicated process, and it probably is. I will admit that I have a little bit of OCD when it comes to this sort of thing, and I'm probably a little bit obsessive with it. And maybe you don't want to be that obsessive. That's fine. That's totally up to you. But that's how I gain stage, and that's what I determined to be gain staging. Okay, so there's the difference between using the faders and using clip gain and hitting plugins. I also like to keep my plugins uniform as well, which is sort of part of gain staging because each one feeds into the next plugin. So if possible, depending on the plugin, I like the volume to remain the same whether it's bypassed or unbypassed. So if there is an adjustment, like in the case of here, and the plugin is doing a boost in volume, I will generally turn it down so that when I bypass and unbypass, there is no gain. And what that does is that then guarantees that what you're feeding into the next plugin, again, has not changed in volume, and you're not suddenly hitting the next plugin too hard or too soft. So you might have some questions from this because it is a little bit confusing. Maybe I didn't explain it quite properly, or maybe it made perfect sense to you. I don't know, but hopefully I've made it fairly clear to how I do it. Now, again, you don't have to do it the same way as me. I'm just explaining my process with gain staging and the way I work with gain staging. So if anything wasn't clear, please do ask questions in the comments. Happy to answer anything. Hopefully this has been of help to you, and I'll catch you in the next video.